Namaste. People find it difficult to understand how to recognize the advent of a new level of consciousness as initial signs begin to appear. There are, in fact, numerous signs if we look at the history of humanity and we look at where things are in the modern day world. For instance, we see the coming together of people through advanced communication where there is now a worldwide network, you could say, the internet and other communication methods that allow people all over the world from different backgrounds, cultures, social settings, religions, whatever, to interact with each other. And that is something that is bringing humanity to the point of starting to recognize our inherent oneness. Another point is that in the past, everything has been done more or less secretly, and levels of falsehood and self-dealing were kept strictly under covers, much of it protected by what we might call the old boy network. And nowadays we see increasingly that these falsehoods and these self-dealing operations are being exposed and brought to light. And that is absolutely something new in our world. We see that people are much more aware of the environment and our relationship to the environment. And that is also something new. 50, 60, 70 years ago even, people had much less awareness about the interrelated necessity of maintaining an environment and keeping it in balance. And today, this is becoming a major concern. And in fact, even major corporations are taking notice. And major insurance companies are looking at the risks, for instance, of climate change, which wasn't happening 60 or 70 years ago. So they are definitely waking up to the reality of the impact of humanity on the world and the need to move towards a more balanced approach. There's also a new level of concern about the needs and suffering of people all over the world. We see humanitarian movements. We see concerns with first aid, Doctors Without Borders, sending food aid and medical aid to people everywhere. There's an earthquake or a tornado or a famine, and suddenly people all over the world are mobilizing to try and help people that they have no direct connection with. And that also is a sign of a new global understanding, awareness, and consciousness developing. We see an increased pressure to move away from things that create harm or create a toxic environment. We have more clean energy production. We have an increased focus on removing heavy metals from our food supply and watching and removing toxic materials and disapproving toxic materials that have been used in the past. This represents another level of understanding that people did not have 70 or 80 years ago. So we see that many things are moving. In addition to that, we see a worldwide movement of people working within themselves for greater awareness, greater consciousness, greater focus on how to live in harmony within themselves. We see a worldwide growth of interest in yoga, Tai Chi, meditation, Ayurveda, traditional healing methods, vision quests, etc. All of these things represent a relatively new worldwide movement as opposed to a relationship of an individual randomly here or there. We see attempts to bring forward a venue and methodology to work out differences between countries, experiments like the League of Nations originally, and then the United Nations. And it must be noted that the success or failure of any particular initiative does not reflect upon the very fact that such initiatives are taking place and that have gathered people all over the world and countries all over the world to participate in them, however flawed these initial attempts may be. We see the development of new forms of intentional communities. And here we've got places like Findhorn or places like Oroville in South India. And at Oroville, for instance, they have people from dozens of countries speaking dozens of languages, different religious backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different educational backgrounds, living together and trying to do things that improve and work out both the relationship between people and their governance, and setting up programs and projects to try to tackle and initially work towards a solution of the major crises that we face in humanity, the crisis of water, the crisis of the collapse of the ocean fisheries, the crisis of pollution, a crisis of waste and energy imbalances. All of these things need to be understood and dealt with. And at Oroville, we see a community focused on and actively working on finding solutions that functionally begin to address these major human issues and problems. We see actually another example, and that is that we see a development of a worldwide interest community so that people of similar interests, wherever they are in the world, whatever their background, can find people of common interest and join with them and work through that common interest. This is something that is unique in modern day. In the past, everything was fragmented and isolated. Now we see people joining together across boundaries to find where their commonality may support one another. We see increasing focus on the rights of minorities. And we've seen over the last couple hundred years, many countries abolish slavery, for instance, which has been a scourge of humanity for literally thousands of years. We see an increasing focus on bringing about equality for women in the world. And while there are still major resistance areas to this, there are also major steps forward in creating a space where women can exercise free and equal rights in the political, economic, and social spheres. Again, these things are not perfect. They're not complete, but they represent new steps that could not be seen even 100 years ago. So we see that each of these things are new initiatives, and they all speak to a common underlying thread that there is a new awareness, a new consciousness, if you will, that is slowly permeating humanity and making itself felt. We see an increased movement for better treatment of children. Child labor has been outlawed in many countries, and in European countries, there was child labor up to the late 1800s. Well, now that's changing. There are laws, there are protective measures, and while it may still occur, when it's discovered, the penalties can be enforced and severe so that companies can take some concern about whether they undertake to have child labor in their organization. There's an increased understanding of the oneness of all life and all existence on the planet. The photograph taken from outer space of the planet really illustrated that oneness, and many people have been impacted by that. Their mindset has been changed, and they're beginning to understand that we live together in a fragile environment, and that if we don't work together to solve the problems of toxicity and pollution and improper use of resources and climate change, etc., those who don't live together and work together are going to die together. And people are understanding that. We see more of a global awareness as opposed to purely a local awareness. You go back 100 or 150 years and everything was centered about the local needs of each community. And now we're beginning to see that everything impacts everything else, and we're looking at a global awareness developing. And finally, we see an increased acceptance of alternative states of awareness, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, spiritual experiences of various sorts, which in former times were basically very much kept hidden because people were afraid to speak about experiences that they had, things they could not relate to other people without being ridiculed. If we look back, we can see that science, medicine, give us a new, deeper understanding of how things work. And we see a breaking down of the walls between various disciplines as people start to open their minds to a broader, unified view of our reality. It must be noted that there is at the same time an extreme, aggressive resistance to the type of changes that are coming about here. There is a retrogressive movement. That is actually a sign of the power of the new consciousness that is working, because as they say, a cornered beast is more dangerous. It reacts because its very existence is threatened. And the fact that we see this kind of aggressive, very strong reaction from conservative, retrogressive forces that do not want to change and do not want to adopt the new reality implies that they feel and understand and experience that new reality coming and moving and changing things at a very fast pace. And so the very resistance and its nature and its strength represents for us another sign that a new consciousness is at work in the world. And that is a sign of hope and a sign of consolation for us when we think that everything we do, all of the changes we make, all of the focus we put into things may not be having an impact. In reality, they are not only having an impact, they are having a tremendous impact. And change, while it seems slow to our limited human individual life experience, in fact, is extremely fast in relation to the way the societies undergo change. And what we see in today's world is an unprecedented, very fast, radical transformation of the way we relate to ourselves, to our communities, to our societies, and to our lives, and to the planet. And that is the sign of a new consciousness. Om.